Thanksgiving's full. Maybe next year. The text made me laugh. So I ordered dinner for 120 people on my roof instead. I assumed they wouldn't notice, but when that stretch limo pulled past the board's Bentleys, my grandmother stepped out holding a single piece of paper, and my entire family froze. My name is Aurora Lawson. I am 33 years old, and I am the founder of Falcon Route. If you got a package delivered in Chicago in the last 48 hours, chances are my platform optimized its last-mile journey. I build systems that find the most efficient path. I was standing on the 48th floor of my building, looking down at the gridlock on Lakeshore Drive, when my phone vibrated on the black granite countertop. It was a text from my father. Richard. Thanksgiving's full. Maybe next year. 8 words. I read them twice. A small, cold laugh escaped my throat. It was not a sound of humor. It was a sound of recognition. The inevitable finally arriving. Stated in plain text, I typed back 2 words. No worries. No worries was a shield. No worries was the polite veneer I had perfected over 3 decades. It was the armor I wore to cover a lifetime of being asked to sit at the folding card table, the one shoved in the drafty corner of the living room, while the real family sat at the polished mahogany table. My penthouse is sparse. It is not warm. It is functional. The kitchen is not a chef's kitchen in the way luxury magazines mean. It is a small industrial-grade setup. Stainless steel, commercial-grade appliances, efficient. It opens onto a large rooftop terrace, which I had winterized with a heavy-duty glass greenhouse. I could see the steel-gray sky reflecting off the glass. My family dynamic is simple. My parents, Richard and Beth, orbit my older sister, Sloan. Sloan is the star. She is a high-powered attorney at a white shoe firm. She is the one they brag about. She is the one who gets the center seat at the mahogany table. My younger brother, Noah, is the diplomat. His entire life is a balancing act of strategic neutrality. He stays in the middle, which means he never, ever takes my side. I closed the text message. The memory hit, sharp and fast, like a flash cut in a film. Me, 9 years old, holding a platter of rolls. The big table is full, laughter, wine glasses clinking. Sloan, already a teenager, is holding court. My mother, Beth, is laughing, her eyes locked on Sloan. Aurora, honey, we've got you set up right over there, my father says. Not looking at me, he points. There is the wobbly card table, covered in a paper cloth. I am seated with a second cousin I've never met, and an elderly great-aunt who is already asleep. The chair is metal. It is cold. I shook the memory away. I picked up my phone again. If there is no path, my algorithms build one. I opened the internal building management app. It runs on a custom logistics framework. I helped the developers design. I swiped to the amenities and services portal. I booked the terrace. I ordered 4 commercial-grade field kitchens. I ordered 20 high-output patio heaters. I ordered 600 feet of weatherproof, warm-spectrum fairy lights. I was initiating Plan B Penthouse Thanksgiving. I switched apps. A secure message to my assistant. Maeve understands efficiency. Maeve, I typed. Change of plans. I'm hosting. I need a guest list of 100. Find me 100 people who need a warm meal. Prioritize Falcon Route drivers on the night shift. Add local hospital nurses. Third shift security guards. The people who are working while everyone else is home. A notification popped up from the building app. A generic memo from the Homeowners Association. The HOA. A reminder. As per building regulations, all rooftop terrace events are limited to fewer than 50 persons for safety and insurance purposes. I smiled. I opened my secure drive. I pulled up the full building covenants, a 200-page PDF. I scrolled to the section I knew by heart. Section 9, Subclause B. I had read every line before I signed the check for this place. My phone vibrated again, a different tone, a private message from Noah. Hey, just heard the plan. Sloan invited her whole associate team from the firm. Like, The partners and everyone. Mom says the table is just completely packed. Guess it got hard for them to fit you. Sorry. Guess it got hard. That was the line. Not we saved you a seat. Not we told Sloane to be reasonable. Just, it got hard. I looked across my vast, empty living room, my own dining table, a massive slab of reclaimed wood. Sat empty. It could seat 12. I looked back at the city. If their table is full, I whispered to the reflection in the glass, I'll just build a new one. An email dinged in my inbox. It was from the building system, but it was personal. My neighbor in 4803, Mr. DeLuca. He used to be a famous television chef. Some PBS show I dimly remembered my grandmother watching. He was retired now. Mostly just yelled at pigeons from his balcony. Miss Lawson, the email read, the smell of that veal stock you were reducing last Tuesday was audacious. Too much time, perhaps? But the clarity was professional. I hear the logistical hum of a large-scale event through the walls. If you are planning something significant and find yourself in need of a commis chef who knows his way around a turkey, I am spectacularly bored. Let me know. I felt the first genuine smile of the day, a new variable, a good one. I went back to my operations plan. 100 was not enough, not for this. I messaged Maeve again. Update, we are scaling, 120 seated guests, 30 additional meals for buffer and support staff. I need the freight elevator booked for a 24-hour block. Notify building operations we are loading in at 0600. I pulled up the CAD render of the rooftop I had commissioned when I bought the place. I began dragging and dropping assets, a long, continuous line of tables, forming a single, unbroken chain, heated tents at either end, the electric roasting stations, placed precisely over the reinforced steel load-bearing points. I uploaded the schematic to the building's ops portal. My phone buzzed, a social media alert. My mother, Beth, had just posted. It was a photo from last Christmas. Her, my father, Sloane, and Noah. They were all smiling, wearing matching pajamas. I had been in Singapore, closing our first international deal. I had not been invited to that, either. The caption, feeling so blessed this Thanksgiving, cannot wait to have our complete family all together. Gratitude is everything. Complete. I tapped the 3 dots. I did not unfriend. I did not block. That was emotional. I was logistical. I clicked mute posts from Beth Lawson. I sent one final message to Maeve. It was the only rule for the night. One last thing. There will be no kids' table. There will be no overflow seating. There are no +1s, and there is no B list. Everyone who walks through that door is main table. Understood. I hit send. The sun was setting. The city lights began to glow. One by one. A new grid coming to life. I had work to do. I was 11 the first time I baked a pie entirely by myself. I had spent a week practicing the lattice crust. The scent of cinnamon, nutmeg, and apples filled my lungs, and it felt like pride. I carried the heavy Pyrex dish. It was still warm into the dining room. The big table was already set, polished mahogany, the good crystal, the heirloom silverware. It was loud, laughter. My father pouring wine, my mother adjusting a centerpiece, and Sloane, my older sister, holding court, telling a story about her debate team. She had brought nothing. I held out the pie. I made this. My mother, Beth, turned. Her smile was brief and tight. Oh, how rustic. Aurora. She did not take it from me. She motioned to my great aunt. Let's have Aunt Marge try a piece first. You know her stomach is delicate, but if she can handle it, it's safe for the rest of us. There was a polite ripple of laughter, not cruel, just casual, the dismissal. I watched Aunt Marge take a tiny, suspicious bite. It's fine. The pie was relegated to the kitchen counter. Hours later, when the main dessert was gone, slices were passed to the wobbly card table, the one in the drafty hallway where I was sitting. It was cold by then. I remember taking a bite. The cinnamon, which I had measured so perfectly, tasted like dust. It tasted like ash. Maybe next year became the running gag. Maybe next year. Aurora will make the varsity team, my father would say, ruffling Sloane's hair, who was already team captain. Maybe next year, Aurora will get the lead in the play, my mother would muse, right after Sloane's curtain call. It was their gentle, polite way of saying, not now, which, I learned, always meant, not you. When I graduated from high school, I was valedictorian. Sloane had graduated 2 years prior, magna cum laude. My parents framed 2 photographs and set them on the mantelpiece, one of me in my cap, one of Sloane from her ceremony. My mother wrote the caption on the silver frame herself. So proud that both our daughters are so smart. Not valedictorian, just smart. Sloane's achievements were itemized. Mine were averaged. The real break happened the spring I got my acceptance letters. I received a full scholarship to Stanford. Engineering. It was not just an offer. It was an escape. 4 years of tuition, room, and board, all covered. It was freedom, printed on expensive, cream-colored cardstock. I ran into the living room, waving the letter. Sloane was home from her Ivy League university, complaining about the grading curve in her art history elective. I handed the letter to my mother. She read it. Her smile was thin. Stanford Aurora. That's so far away. She did not look at me. Her gaze drifted across the room to Sloane, who was idly filing her nails. Are you sure you can handle being that far from home? You've always been so sensitive. It was not a question. It was a verdict. She was not worried for me. She was worried I would be an inconvenience, a problem to be managed from 2,000 miles away. Sloane looked up, annoyed. Stanford isn't that where all the tech nerds go past the remote? That was the moment the no-worries armor fused to my skin. I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply nodded. I'll manage. And I did. Full ride covers tuition. It does not cover life. While Sloane used her breaks to network at my father's country club, I learned to code. I learned Python, then C++, then deep dive systems architecture. I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour coffee shop near campus, the smell of burnt coffee and industrial bleach clinging to my clothes. I was exhausted, but I was building. I took overload classes every semester. I graduated in 3 years. My first apartment off campus had black mold creeping up the bathroom wall. I scrubbed it myself with bleach until my hands were raw. I paid my own rent. I never asked them for $1. I had learned that reliance was just another word for liability. People always ask me why I chose logistics. It is not glamorous. It is not high-stakes law. It is systems. It is predictability. I chose logistics because a server does not care who your sister is. An algorithm cannot be charmed. A data graph does not light up brighter because you are related to the CEO. Code is brutally, beautifully impartial. It either works or it fails. It is the purest meritocracy I have ever found. Falcon Root was born in a rented garage in Palo Alto. It was just me. 3 secondhand servers I rebuilt myself, and a routing algorithm I wrote that was smarter, faster, and more adaptive than anything on the market. My first client was a regional supermarket chain in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the Snow Belt. Their problem was simple. Their last-mile delivery trucks were losing thousands of dollars a week in spoiled produce. Ice, inefficient routes, bad timing. I integrated my system into their fleet. I spent 3 nights in the back of a refrigerated truck, monitoring sensor data, tweaking the algorithm in real time. My system optimized driver paths based on real-time weather data, traffic patterns, and prioritized delivery windows. After 1 month of using Falcon Root, their spoilage rate dropped from 15% to near zero. For years. Falcon Root was my successful experiment. Then the pandemic hit, the world stopped, the supply chain shattered, and suddenly, last-mile optimization was not an experiment. It was a lifeline. My algorithm was no longer just moving avocados. It was moving medical supplies, ventilator parts, PPE, sterile test kits. When the ports choked and the highways jammed, my system found the open paths. While Sloane was learning to bake sourdough in her downtown condo, My algorithm was ensuring a hospital in rural Illinois got its shipment of masks. The press noticed. Forbes, Bloomberg. The unseen algorithm saving Chicago's supply chain. They called me a disruptor. They called me essential. I did not send the links home. I knew what would happen. Oh, that's nice. Honey, did you see Sloan was just named in 30 Under 30 by the local bar association? My success was invisible to them because it was not their kind of success. With every new contract, every expansion, I did something my financial advisor called insane. I moved 50% of my personal profits into a separate, locked fund. I called it the Long Table Fund. I did not know what it was for. I just knew that one day I would need it. I knew that maybe next year had an expiration date, and I would be the one to set it. The fund grew. It grew into millions, last year, on a rainy Tuesday. I signed the deal. A major logistics conglomerate wanted to acquire Falcon Route. They wanted the algorithm. I said no. I offered them a partial acquisition. They got 49%. I kept 51%. I kept total control. I kept the voting rights. In exchange, I received a wire transfer that was, by any definition, absurd. I did not buy a mansion in the suburbs. I did not buy a fleet of sports cars. I bought this, the entire 48th floor of one of the tallest residential buildings in Chicago. I did not buy it for the view, though the view is staggering. I did not buy it to show off. I bought it for the airspace. I bought it because it was the only place high enough and private enough to build exactly what I needed, a table with no head, a table where everyone had the best seat. That is why I built the greenhouse on the terrace. It is not for orchids. It is a proof of concept. With the right engineering, the right warmth, bread can rise in the middle of a blizzard. Life can thrive in a hostile environment. Last week, I had a single chair delivered. It is not part of a set. It is a simple, heavy oak armchair. Before it arrived, I had the woodworker carve something into the back, just below the headrest, where only the person sitting in it could feel. For the one who felt unseen. I run my fingers over the letters every morning. I stood there, looking at that chair, and made a silent promise. No more folding chairs. Not for me. Not for anyone I invite. I finished mapping the final heater placement on my tablet. My phone vibrated on the counter. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. It was an official notification from the HOA portal. An immediate flag on my event submission. Urgent notice of non-compliance. An immediate inspection of Unit 4800 and associated rooftop terrace is required. Regarding a planned gathering of unsafe capacity, please be advised. Building operations has scheduled this inspection for 0700, Thanksgiving morning. Failure to comply will result in immediate event cancellation and fines. They were already moving. They had been alerted. This was not a friendly inquiry. This was the opening salvo. They were demanding an inspection. Tomorrow, 7 in the morning, Thanksgiving Day. The official email from the Homeowners Association landed in my inbox at 8:04 p.m. It was polite, sterile, and utterly predictable. Dear Ms. Lawson, we are in receipt of your operational plan for a large-scale event on the community rooftop terrace. Please be advised that pursuant to Article 9, Section 3 of the Building Covenants, any gathering exceeding 50 persons requires written approval from the board, submitted no less than 14 business days in advance. Your request, submitted less than 24 hours prior, is therefore denied. We apologize for any inconvenience. I read the word denied. I read inconvenience. They were citing the rulebook. They just did not realize I had been the one to help write it. When I purchased the Penthouse, the covenants were a disorganized mess. I rewrote their data architecture as a courtesy, structuring the appendices and cross-referencing the clauses. I did not panic. I opened the 200-page PDF of the bylaws I kept on my local drive. My fingers tapped the search command. Article 9, Section 3, the 50-person limit. Correct. But they had forgotten the appendix I insisted on. I scrolled down. Appendix 9, Section 3B. An exception to the capacity limit and 14-day review period may be granted for events of a recognized charitable nature, provided the resident host secures and provides proof of a minimum $5 million event insurance policy, dependent safety certification from a licensed inspector, and all necessary municipal permits for food and assembly. They were trying to cite me for a party. I was executing a charitable operation. This was not a negotiation. It was a compliance check. My fingers began to move. This was logistics. This was my native language. First, insurance. I opened a new browser tab. I went to a specialist high-risk event insurer I used for Falconrote's launch parties. I filled out the web form. 150 persons, outdoor, temporary heating, temporary cooking. 5 minutes and a credit card transaction later. A $10 million event policy PDF was in my inbox. I downloaded it. Second, safety. I was not going to wait for a city inspector. I called the private fire and safety compliance firm that certified my company's warehouses. "It's Aurora Lawson," I said when the on-call manager answered. "I have an emergency. I need a full inspection and certification for a temporary outdoor kitchen, electrical load analysis, fire suppression placement, and wind abatement. Tonight, in the next 3 hours." There was a pause. "Ms. Lawson, that's a holiday rate call-out." "I am aware," I said. "Send your best team. I will pay double." "They're on their way." I hung up. I pulled the structural engineering reports I commissioned before installing the greenhouse. The terrace was reinforced steel, rated for 100 pounds per square foot. My plan, with 150 people, heaters, and kitchens, came to less than 25 pounds per square foot. I attached the original engineer's letter to a new file. Third, municipal permits. This was the bottleneck. The county health department was closed, but the online portal for temporary outdoor food facility permits was automated. As long as you had a certified food protection manager on record. I dialed my neighbor, DeLuca. He picked up on the first ring. "What?" "It's Aurora. 4801. The HOA is trying to shut me down. They're citing food safety." A dry, crackling laugh came through the phone. "Food safety. Those animals microwaved salmon in the hallway last week. I could smell the plastic melting. They are idiots. Lawson, what do you need?" "I need your ServSafe certification number and your digital signature on a temporary health permit application. I need you listed as the professional sponsor." "I'll do you one better," he grumbled. "I'm coming over. I'll bring my own knives and my fire extinguisher. Those amateurs on the board wouldn't know a Class K extinguisher if it hit them. I am not letting them win on a technicality, and I am bringing my utility cart, my tools. You probably own spatulas that bend." "Thank you. Mr. DeLuca, do not thank me. Just save me a dark meat platter." He hung up. While I waited for the fire inspectors, I drafted the core of my plan. I opened my CAD program. This was a depot. I mapped egress paths. 2 clear, wide-lane exits from the terrace, marked with battery-powered emergency lighting. I mapped fire extinguisher placement 1 Class K unit every 15 meters, precisely, with clear signage. I added the wind guard specifications for the cooking stations. I called my private security contractor, the same one that ran logistics security for Falconrote's cargo depots at the port. I did not want the building's guards, who answered to the HOA. I wanted my own. "I need a 4-man team," I told the supervisor. 6 p.m. to midnight. This is not a crowd control situation. It is a crowd flow situation. I want professionals. People who understand ingress and egress, not just muscle, export authority, if you have them. "Understood. Ms. Lawson, we'll send the A-team." The private fire inspectors arrived at 10 p.m. They were fast, professional, and impressed by DeLuca's organizational rigor. They tested the GFI circuits for the electric roasters. They measured the distance between the heaters and the tent canvas. They reviewed my egress map. At 10:32 p.m., I had a signed, dated, and time-stamped certificate of safety compliance. Now, I assembled the weapon. It was a single PDF, 29 pages long. Page 1, a cover letter, formally invoking Appendix 9, Section 3B. Page 2, The Articles of Incorporation for the Long Table Fund, the charitable foundation I had registered 3 years ago and funded with the Long Table Fund. Page 3. The $10 million event insurance policy, paid in full. Page 4. The signed certificate of safety compliance from the private inspection. Page 5. The structural engineer's original load-bearing report for the terrace. Page 6. The submitted application for the temporary outdoor food facility permit. Page 7. DeLuca's professional certifications and his signed statement as food manager. Pages 8 through 20. My complete, detailed operational plan, including the KD diagrams, egress maps, wind abatement strategy, and security deployment. Pages 21 through 29. The full list of confirmed charitable organizations whose members were being served, including the Night Shift Nurses Union and the Regional Transport Drivers League. I addressed the email to the entire HOA board. ISECD 2 people. First, the building's own retained legal counsel. This was the critical move. It forced the board to stop acting emotionally and to filter their response through their lawyer, who would be forced to advise them based on the bylaws, not their feelings. Second, I CC'd Alderman Price. He was our city council representative. He was also, as Mr. DeLuca had gleefully informed me, a passionate foodie who owed DeLuca a favor for a charity dinner last spring. This was the political check. I pressed send. The digital torpedo was in the water. It took them 45 minutes to reply. The response was short, panicked, and sloppy. Submission received. Temporary denial issued pending further review by the board. I laughed. Temporary denial. A stall tactic. They had no grounds. I replied instantly. I quoted the book back to them. Dear Board, thank you for your prompt reply. Pursuant to Article 4, Section 2 of the Covenants, all denials must cite a specific, actionable breach of the covenants or bylaws. Pending further review is not a specific, actionable breach. Please provide the exact article number I am currently in violation of. If you cannot, I will assume this denial is void and proceed as planned under the charitable exception of 9.3b. Regards, Aurora Lawson. This was the checkmate. I had the insurance. I had the safety certification. I had the permit filed. I had the professional sponsor. They had feelings. I had documentation. While they scrambled to find a rule I had not followed, I moved to the next phase. I sent a 2-minute video walkthrough to Maeve. It was a simple, steady shot from my phone. Touring the empty terrace. I superimposed my CAD diagrams. This is the primary egress path. This is the placement for extinguisher K1. This is the certified electrical junction, the long table safe, compliant and necessary. Maeve pushed the volunteer sign-up link to the Falcon Route Drivers Network and the local nurses union message board. We did not ask for volunteers. We asked for partners. Within 3 hours, all 40 support staff slots were full. Then, the inevitable. My phone buzzed. A text from Noah. Hey, this is getting crazy. The HOA memo got leaked to the building's resident portal. Mom and Dad saw it. They are freaking out. They said you are making a scene just to embarrass them. Making a scene. The words vibrated with the same frequency as maybe next year, the same casual dismissal, the same accusation that my very existence was an inconvenience, an embarrassment. They were not angry that I had been excluded. They were angry that my response to being excluded was visible. I looked at the orders I had placed, the food, the heaters, the wool blankets I had ordered for every chair, the lights. I typed back a single, cold line to Noah. The only color tonight will be warm. I put the phone down. A new email arrived. This one was not from the HOA's general account. It was from their lawyer, the one I had CC'd. His tone was professional, sharp, and carried the implicit weight of defeat. Ms. Lawson, your 29-page submission has been reviewed by our office. Your citation of Appendix 9.3b appears to be valid, contingent upon verification. The board, however, retains its right to inspect and ensure all submitted plans are physically and accurately implemented. As such, please be prepared to meet the city building inspector. a representative from the fire marshal's office, and 2 members of the HOA board at precisely 7 a.m. Thanksgiving morning for a final, non-negotiable compliance inspection. If any item on your submitted plan is not in place, if any heater is misaligned, if any extinguisher is missing, or if the inspector finds any reason to doubt your load calculations, the event will be summarily and immediately canceled, and your access to the terrace amenity will be revoked. We trust this is clear. I closed the email. They could not stop me on paper, so they were betting I could not execute the plan overnight. They were betting on failure. I looked at my watch. It was almost midnight. I messaged Maeve. Move the load-in time. We're not starting at 6 a.m. We're starting now. 6 a.m. The freight elevator doors opened with a heavy, hydraulic sigh. A wave of frigid November air rolled into my penthouse from the open terrace, carrying the first hints of snow and the metallic smell of the city waking up below. I hit the master switch. 100,000 warm white fairy lights, strung through the rafters of the glass greenhouse and along the perimeter of the entire terrace, snapped on at once. They cast a soft, golden glow against the pre-dawn darkness. The kitchen prep stations, stainless steel and sterile, gleamed, and the team, my team, began to move. We had worked through the night. The infrastructure was in place, exactly as my 29-page PDF had dictated. The heaters were positioned, the fire extinguishers were mounted, the windbreaks were secured. Now, we had 1 hour until the 7 a.m. inspection, 1 hour to turn a compliant, empty space into a living, breathing feast. Mr. DeLuca had arrived at 5:45 a.m., wheeling a massive battered steel utility cart that looked like it had survived a war. He was already in his element, a crisp white apron over a black chef's coat. He did not say hello. "Right," he barked, his voice gravelly. "This is not a democracy. This is a kitchen." "My kitchen, Lawson, your logistics are adequate." This was the highest compliment he had ever given me. He slammed laminated signs down on the steel tables, creating his stations. Station 1 turkey, breakdown and roasting, you 2. He pointed at 2 culinary students who had shown up, wide-eyed and terrified. "You're on carving. Do not embarrass me." Station 2 potatoes. "We are not making glue. We are making pommes puree. It is a science. You," he pointed at a man built like a refrigerator. "You're on the ricer." Station 3 gravy and cranberry. "From scratch. If I see a can, I will throw you off the roof." Station 4 root vegetables and soup. Station 5 bread and desserts. He had turned my terrace into his own private culinary battlefield. He was magnificent. My team, the volunteers, were not volunteers, they were partners. Maeve stood at the entrance, handing out the lanyards I had custom printed overnight. They did not say volunteer. They said, host plus guest, a woman named Amelia, a night shift nurse from Northwestern Memorial, took hers. She was still in her scrubs, her face creased with exhaustion but her eyes bright. Host and guest. Exactly, Maeve said, smiling. We're all both. Amelia nodded, a slow, deep understanding. She tied the lanyard on and went straight to DeLuca's vegetable station. She picked up a knife and began dicing carrots with a speed and precision that was almost frightening. She had the hands of a surgeon. Another man, one of my lead Falcon Route night drivers, tapped the sign-in sheet. Big Mike, he said. He was, in fact, enormous, with a kind face and hands the size of dinner plates. He looked at the chaos of the kitchen. Boss, he said to me, this looks complicated. Where do you need the heavy lifting? I pointed him to the welcoming station. Right there. Mike, you're not lifting. You're organizing. He looked confused until he saw the pile. While the kitchen team prepped food, Mike's team prepped the warmth. We had a mountain of gifts, thick wool socks, soft, fleece-lined scarves, $100 gas cards, $50 coffee cards. Mike and 2 other drivers began to arrange them, not just dumping them in a box, but laying them out on a table like a fine display. My role was not to cook. My role was flow. I stood at my central console, a tablet running my own logistics software. This was my depot. Maeve, I said, pointing. Raw ingredients come in from the freight elevator. Staging area Alpha. They move to the prep stations. DeLuca's team processes. From prep, they move to the cooking line, the roasters, and the induction burners. I swiped on the screen. From the line, plated food goes to the distribution tables. Here and here. That's our last mile. The guests are served. Then, the reverse logistics bus tubs with used dishes come back to the cleaning station by the service door. Wash, reset, repeat. It's an assembly line. It's a system. As long as we trust the system, no one gets overwhelmed. It was working. The terrace, once cold and empty, was now thrumming with coordinated energy. A young man, maybe 18, was setting up a music stand and a violin case next to one of the tall patio heaters. He was the son of one of the culinary students, Jackson. The retired port security guard I had hired walked over. Jackson was tall and thin, with an aura of absolute authority. He looked at the kid. "You're going to play that thing?" The young man flinched. Yeah. I was told to bring it. Just some classical stuff. Bach." Jackson stared at him for a long moment, then broke into a slow, rare smile. "Good. You play those scales nice and loud. Son, it will make the pies cook faster." He clapped the boy on the shoulder and continued his patrol, checking the seals on the windbreaks. The violinist, after a moment of confusion, smiled and began to run through a fast, bright arpeggio. The notes were like sparks in the cold air. In the greenhouse, which was now warm and humid, a different kind of station was set up. Amelia's 2 children, who had come with her from the hospital, were sitting at a low table. They were not shunted aside. They were not an inconvenience. Maeve had stocked the table with stacks of paper leaves in red, yellow, and orange, and dozens of crayons. I had created a drawing corner, not a kid's table. I watched for a moment as the little girl, maybe 6 years old, carefully wrote, "My mom," on a paper leaf. I felt something in my chest tighten, a hinge rusting shut. I turned back to the operation. From a smaller secondary kitchen set up on the covered loggia, a new smell was rolling out, fighting the wind, a massive bubbling pot of mulled apple cider, thick with cinnamon, cloves, and allspice. It was a scent so powerful, so fundamentally comforting. It cut right through the industrial smell of the steel and the cold ozone of the coming snow. Brown butter for the basting, rosemary and thyme, black pepper, the deep, savory scent of roasting vegetables. It all swirled together, a defiant bubble of warmth and life, 48 stories above the sleeping city. I walked the length of the tables. They were set, one single, unbroken line, snaking across the terrace. No VIP section, no head table, no center. I began placing the name cards myself. A simple, printed card for every confirmed guest. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was not Maeve. It was not DeLuca. It was an anonymous, blocked number, a text message. "Stop this. You are making a spectacle and embarrassing the family." I read it. I felt the familiar, cold pinprick, the accusation. "You are the problem. Your actions are the issue, not the actions that led to them." I did not reply. I did not block. I muted the conversation. I had an inspection in 20 minutes. I had no time for ghosts. I placed the last card. Walter, boss. Maeve was at my elbow, her face pale, holding her own tablet. "We have a problem. A real one. The inspectors are early." "No, worse." She showed me the screen. An email chain from the Regional Drivers Union. "All 120 guest slots are confirmed. They're all accounted for. But that group of long-haul drivers from the Wisconsin route, the ones who said they were stopping at the border, they're not. They're coming all the way downtown. They just cleared the checkpoint. They're 15 people. 15 more." She looked at me, her eyes wide. "The seating chart is full. The tables are set. I don't have 15 more of anything." 15 more. 15 people who had nowhere else to go. 15 people who were expecting a seat. I looked at the perfectly arranged, compliant terrace. I looked at the single, unbroken line of tables. I thought of my father's text. "Thanksgiving's full," I smiled. "No, that's not a problem. Maeve, that's the whole point." I walked over to the supply closet where we kept the spares. The contingency. "This is not my mother's dining room. We are not full. Roll out the emergency heaters from the storage unit. Pull the 5 reserved tables from the freight elevator. Open the contingency supply." DeLuca, who had overheard, pointed a massive wooden spoon at me. He was grinning. "Let them come. Lawson," he boomed, his voice echoing over the violin. "A real chef always makes surplus. We have enough food for an army." Maeve laughed, a sound of pure relief. "Yes, chef. Yes, boss." We had 10 minutes. 10 minutes to scale the operation. Again, 10 minutes to build 15 more seats. I looked at the main entrance, and I saw them. The clock on my phone read exactly 7 a.m. The inspectors were here. It was 7:05 a.m. I was directing Maeve and Big Mike on the placement of the 15 new settings, creating a smaller line of tables near the greenhouse. When the main elevator chimed, it was not the heavy, industrial groan of the freight elevator. It was the quiet, refined chime of the residential lift. The work on the terrace did not stop, but it became quieter. The clatter of pans softened. The violin music faltered for a beat. Every head turned. The polished steel doors slid open. 4 people stood there, framed in the doorway, a perfect tableau of bureaucratic hostility. The first was the official city building inspector, a man with a tired face and a heavy clipboard. The second was the fire marshal, who looked younger, sharper, and immediately began scanning the ceiling for sprinkler heads. The third was Mr. Thorne, the building's retained legal counsel. He was in a perfectly pressed suit, carrying a slim leather briefcase, and the fourth, leading them, was Mrs. Davies, the president of the Homeowners Association. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat, pearls, and a scent so expensive and cold it seemed to suck the warmth from the smell of the mulled cider. She held her own clipboard like it was a shield and a weapon. The violin stopped. "Ms. Lawson," Mrs. Davies said. Her voice was brittle. "It is 7:05. Your inspection team is here." I nodded. I did not move toward them. I let them step onto my terrace. "Good morning. As you can see, we are on schedule." "This is," Mrs. Davies began, her eyes wide with undisguised horror as she took in the scale of the operation. The field kitchens, the massive steel pots, the rows of tables. "This is completely unacceptable. This is a fire hazard. It's a circus." Mr. Thorne, the lawyer, stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on her arm. "Mrs. Davies, we are here for the 7A compliance check." His voice was dry, precise. He looked at me, then at the inspectors. "Gentlemen, please proceed." The fire marshal went first. He was all business. He marched straight to Mr. DeLuca's cooking station. DeLuca, holding a 14-pound turkey, simply stared at him. "You the chef?" the marshal asked. "I'm the food manager of record," DeLuca grumbled. "Show me your extinguishers." DeLuca pointed with the turkey's leg. "Class K, under the prep table. Class K by the deep fryer. Class ABC, every 15 meters, per the submitted diagram. All tagged. All certified last night." The marshal pulled one out. "Check the gauge. Check the tag." He nodded. He walked over to the nearest patio heater. He pulled a tape measure from his belt. He measured the distance from the glowing red element to the canvas windbreak. 24 inches, he said to himself. He checked his tablet. Code requires 18. He walked the entire perimeter. He checked every heater. He inspected the wiring on the electric roasters. He returned to his partner, the building inspector. "Heaters are compliant. Wiring is secure. Egress paths are clear and marked. Suppression is adequate, from a fire code perspective," he said, loud enough for all of us to hear. "She's clean. Pass." Mrs. Davies's face tightened. One pin pulled from her grenade. She turned to the building inspector. "The weight," she hissed. "Look at all this. The people. There must be over 100 people planned. This terrace cannot support it. It is a gross violation of structural integrity." The building inspector looked at me. "Ma'am, the complaint alleges unsafe load." I did not flinch. "It is addressed in my submission," I said calmly. "Page 5, the original structural engineering report, commissioned from Arup Engineering before my greenhouse was installed. You'll find it attached." I handed him my tablet, open to the correct page. "The terrace is a steel-reinforced concrete slab, rated for a static load of 100 pounds per square foot. My operational plan, which I also submitted to your office, calculates the total load, including all 150 personnel, all staging equipment, and all food, at 24.7 pounds per square foot. We are at less than 25% of capacity." The inspector scrolled through my calculations. He looked at the floor, looked at the tables, looked back at the screen. "The math is correct," he said, handing the tablet back. "The load is well within the specified parameters. There is no structural violation." Mrs. Davies was now visibly vibrating. 2 pins pulled. She rounded on Mr. Thorne. "This is ridiculous. They can't just die." "What about the bylaws? What about our rights?" Mr. Thorne adjusted his tie. He was not on my side. He was on the side of billable hours and legal precedent. He hated this entire situation. "An admirable technical display, Ms. Lawson," he said, his voice flat. "The inspectors, however, are only one part of this." He opened his briefcase. "The board retains oversight on matters of community impact. We have already received 3 official, written complaints from other residents regarding the anticipated and unreasonable noise from this event." He pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I cite Article 12, Section 1, the right to quiet enjoyment. A gathering of this magnitude, with amplified music, is a clear violation of the building's 9 p.m. sound curfew." This was their checkmate. They had moved from objective engineering to subjective feeling. They thought they had me. "A reasonable concern," I said, "and one I anticipated." I walked to my console and picked up a single, fresh document, printed and signed by the county clerk's office just an hour ago. "This is the municipal permit for minor sound amplification, filed with the county last night. It grants a specific, temporary exception for low wattage, non-percussive audio for a charitable event. It allows us to operate until 10:30 p.m. I pointed to the young violinist, who was watching, pale and silent. "Our musician is acoustic. Our background audio is routed through 8 localized, low-decibel speakers, all of which will be aimed inward at the terrace, not outward at the city. The permit is valid. It is filed. It is attached to the submission. Page 16. Mr. Thorne's eyebrow twitched. It was the only sign of emotion he had shown. He had been so sure. Mrs. Davies, however, had no such restraint. "I do not care," she shouted. The word echoed in the sudden quiet. DeLuca froze, holding a basting brush. "I do not care about your permits," she continued, her voice shaking with rage. "This is a residential building. It is not a soup kitchen. It is not a concert hall. We have a right to peace. The board does not approve of this. This activity, it is an inappropriate use of a community space, and we are shutting it down." This was it. The final, emotional argument, the one my entire 29-page document was built to detonate. I took a step forward. My voice was suddenly the only sound on the terrace, low and cold. "That is an interesting choice of words, Mrs. Davies. Inappropriate use." I let the words hang in the freezing air. "Because that brings us to the final, binding clause in the covenants, the one you seem to have overlooked, Article 14, Section 1. I looked directly at Mr. Thorne. He knew exactly what was coming. His face was granite. "I am sure Mr. Thorne recalls it," I continued. "It's a rare clause, but a powerful one. the right to quiet enjoyment, not to defeat charitable use. It specifies, in plain English, that quiet enjoyment cannot be invoked as a subjective, emotional measure to prevent or obstruct a properly insured, fully compliant, non-profit event from taking place. I walked back to my console and picked up the final piece of paper. I did not hand it to them. I held it. "This," I said, "is a letter of acknowledgement from the Chicago Night Shift Alliance, a registered 501c3 nonprofit. It confirms that tonight's dinner is their official, sponsored Thanksgiving outreach event. It also confirms this terrace as the central collection point for their annual winter coat drive, which is also noted in my submission. This event is not a party. It is a chartered charitable act." There was a long, terrible silence. The wind whistled through the beams. The building inspector packed his clipboard. He looked at the fire marshal. He shrugged. "From a city perspective, she's clean, fully permitted, no violations." Mrs. Davies looked at Mr. Thorne. She was pale, her rage replaced by a dawning, frantic panic. "Do something," she whispered. Tell them the board does not consent." Everyone looked at Mr. Thorne. He was their lawyer. He was paid to protect their interests. He sighed. It was a deep, frustrated, expensive sound. He slowly, deliberately, closed his leather briefcase. "Mrs. Davies," he said, his voice dripping with exhaustion, "as I advised the board in my memo at 11 p.m. last night, our legal position is now, and remains, untenable." He turned to me. "Article 4, Section 2, which you so helpfully cited in your email, requires a specific, actionable breach to void an approval. The fire marshal finds you compliant. The building inspector finds you compliant. Your insurance is valid. Your permits are filed." He picked up a speck of lint from his suit sleeve. "And your invocation of Article 14, Section 1, the charitable use exception, legally supersedes the board's subjective disapproval. We cannot stop you based on technical cause because, Ms. Lawson, you have left us with no technical cause. You have satisfied every requirement of the bylaws." In the corner of my eye, I saw Maeve. She had been holding her phone up, pointed at the exchange. She lowered it, her face split by a massive, silent grin. She had been live-streaming the entire execution to the host plus guest internal group. Every driver, every nurse, every volunteer had just heard the victory. Mr. Thorne nodded curtly. "The event may proceed. It must conclude by 10:30 p. As per your permit, the city will conduct a sound check at 9:30 p. Good day, Ms. Lawson, inspectors." He ushered the two city officials toward the elevator. They looked almost relieved. Mrs. Davies did not move. She waited until the elevator doors had closed, leaving just her and me on the terrace. The sounds of chopping and the violin slowly, cautiously, started up again. Her face was a mask of pure reptilian fury. "You think you're so clever," she whispered, her voice venomous. "You think you won. Do not turn this spectacle, into social media." It was a final petty threat, an order. I looked past her, at the long, beautiful tables, at Mr. DeLuca, who was now sliding the first massive turkey into a roaring hot electric roaster, at the violinist, who had started a defiant, joyful Bach piece. "I have no interest in social media, Mrs. Davies," I said, turning back to her. "Tonight, we are just turning it into a family." She stared at me, her mouth open, but no sound came out. She had run out of rules. She had run out of words. She spun on her heel and stabbed the elevator button. The doors opened. She stepped in. The doors closed, sealing her in polished steel. The terrace was quiet for 1 second, and then Mr. DeLuca let out a roar. "All right, you heard the lady? We have a family to feed back to work." The terrace exploded in cheers and laughter. The assembly line kicked back into high gear. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A new text. My mother. Noah told us the HOA was sending inspectors. Aurora, I am begging you, stop this. You are embarrassing this family. Stop it now. I looked at the words. Embarrassing the family. I did not reply. I silenced my phone and put it in my pocket. I had a dinner to host. At 6 p.m., the main elevator chimed, the hum of the kitchen, the low murmur of the host plus guest team, and the high yet clear notes of the violin all paused. This was not the freight elevator. This was the first arrival. The door slid open. An older man stood there, thin and frail, wearing a threadbare but clean suit jacket. He held a wool cap in his hands. His hands were shaking, a constant, fine tremor. He looked at the expanse of lights, the steam rising from the food stations, and the long, impossible table. His eyes, though clouded with age, were bright. He looked terrified. I think I'm in the wrong place, he stammered, looking down at the invitation card Maeve had sent him. It said, "The Penthouse. I'm Walter." I walked over to him, past the check-in station. I did not check his name off a list. I smiled. "Walter, you are in exactly the right place." I gently took his arm. "Welcome home." I led him to the first seat, the one nearest the greenhouse, sheltered from the wind. Jackson, my security lead, saw him, nodded once, and returned with a heavy wool blanket, draping it over Walter's legs. Walter looked up, his eyes suddenly wet, and nodded, and with that, the dam broke. The elevator chimed again, and again. The guests arrived, not in a rush, but in a steady, hesitant stream, as if expecting a trick. 2 women, still in their blue hospital scrubs, walked in. It was Amelia, the night nurse, and her colleague. They were carrying a large, foil-covered tray. "We just got off a 12-hour shift," Amelia said, her voice rough with exhaustion. We didn't know what to bring. We made brownies, for anyone who might have missed dinner last night, too." They placed the tray on the dessert table. They were not guests. They were hosts. They were followed by an elderly couple, the man walking slowly with a cane. They didn't go to the food. They walked directly to me, their eyes scanning the terrace. "We heard about this," the woman said, her voice soft. "We live on the 10th floor. We received the memo from the HOA. We were appalled." The man reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small, linen-wrapped package. "We heard, from one of the security guards, about the chair you had made." He handed me the package. I opened it. It was a single, hand-stitched linen handkerchief, perfectly white, with immaculate, deep blue embroidery in the corner. It did not have initials. It had a phrase. "For the invisible one. We wanted to contribute," the woman said, touching my arm. "That chair. It is for both of us, too." I could not speak. I just nodded, and placed the handkerchief on the back of the carved oak chair. A gift. A sign. Then came the drivers, the 15 who had made the last-minute run from Wisconsin. They were loud. They were laughing. They were stamping the snow from their boots. "Boss," one of them shouted, spotting me. "This is insane. We thought we were getting a cold sandwich in the lobby." They filled the tables, their voices booming, full of life and exhaustion. They told stories of the drive, of the black ice outside Milwaukee that had nearly sent a truck skidding. They told stories of the dispatchers, of the long dark miles. Big Mike, my driver, pointed them to the large wooden board Maeve had set up near the entrance. It was a simple, beautiful piece of salvaged oak, with the words, "What are you thankful for?" painted at the top. Stacks of paper leaves and pencils were set beside it. One of the drivers, a man with a thick beard and tired eyes, took a leaf. He wrote for a moment, his gloved hand clumsy with the pencil. He pinned it to the board. His note was simple. "Grateful to not be eating alone in my cab." Within 20 minutes, the board was full. Leaf over leaf, a riot of orange, red, and yellow, covering the dark wood. The sound of the terrace changed. It was no longer a setup. It was a party. Mr. DeLuca, a glass of cider in his hand, was holding court by the carving station. He told a terrible joke, something about a turkey and a bartender. It was profoundly unfunny. The entire table of drivers and nurses erupted in laughter, a wild, genuine, explosive laugh that bounced off the glass of the greenhouse and echoed into the night. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you are warm and full and safe. The young violinist, sensing the shift, finished his solemn Bach piece. He paused, looked at the laughing crowd, and a small smile touched his face. He changed his tempo. He began to play the opening notes of an old, familiar folk song. A few people hummed. Then one of the older nurses began to sing, her voice a little shy. Almost Heaven, West Virginia. And then Walter, from his seat by the greenhouse, joined in, his voice thin but clear. Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. By the second chorus, the entire terrace was singing. 150 voices, nurses, drivers, chefs, security guards, students. Take me home, country roads. No one filmed it. No one pulled out a phone. We just sang. We sang to the Chicago skyline, a defiant, joyful, ridiculous choir. I saw Jackson, the retired port guard, slip away from his post. He went to the loggia, to the simmering pot of cider. But he walked past it. He went to the secondary station Maeve had set up for the children, the one with the hot cocoa mix and the marshmallows. His massive, rough hands, the ones I had seen checking locks and testing windbreaks, carefully poured hot water into a mug. He stirred it, making sure the powder was dissolved. He dropped in 3 marshmallows. He walked it over to Amelia's 6-year-old daughter, who was sitting at the drawing corner. She had been watching the crowd, looking small. "Here you go, little boss," Jackson murmured, handing her the mug. "Gotta stay warm." The little girl took it with both hands, her face lit by the fairy lights. She had pinned her own leaf to the gratitude board, right at the bottom. I had read it when I passed by. Her crayon letters were large and uneven. "Thank you for someone remembering me." I walked the long line of tables, the single, unbroken line. My job was done. The system was running. I picked up a pitcher of cider and began to refill, topping off glasses. I adjusted a string of fairy lights that had slipped from a rafter. I was just a host. I watched Walter telling a story to a young medical student. I watched Big Mike showing a picture of his children to the elderly couple. I watched DeLuca high-five Amelia over a perfectly carved slice of turkey. My eyes were wet. I blinked, hard, and the cold night air dried the tears before they could fall. I was not sad. I was optimized. My phone vibrated in my pocket. The cold, mechanical intrusion. I pulled it out, a text from a blocked, anonymous number. "What a performance. You must be so proud of your little show." I read the words. Performance, show, the old accusations, the old narrative. I was not real. I was just making a scene. I deleted the message. It was just noise. I would not let it breach the perimeter. I put the phone back. It vibrated again. This time, it was Noah, my brother, the diplomat. It was not a text. It was a picture message. I opened it. The screen lit up with the warm, buttery light of my parents' dining room, the polished mahogany table, the good crystal, my father, Richard, at the head, pouring wine, my mother, Beth, smiling, and Sloane, my sister, in the center, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits, the partners from her firm. They were all raising their glasses. The caption Noah had added was simple. "Family only." I zoomed in. I could not help it. I counted the seats. There, between Sloane and one of the partners, was a gap, a single, polished, perfectly set, empty chair. The water goblet was full. The silverware was gleaming. The napkin was folded. They had not excluded me and replaced me. They had just miscounted. In their effort to curate their perfect, complete family, they had forgotten to add a setting for one of their own guests. They had created their own empty chair. Their table was full, but it was not complete. I started to laugh. It was a quiet, cold laugh, the same one I'd had when I first got my father's text. "Boss?" I looked up, startled. Maeve was at my side, her face serious. "Boss, the local news, Channel 5. They picked up the story, not from us, from the public building portal. The HOA fight. They're calling it Penthouse Charity Feud. They want to come by, after 8 p.m. They want an interview." I looked at the picture on my phone, the empty chair. Then I looked at my tables, full of life. "No," I said, my voice firm. "No interviews, no stage television. Tell them they are not putting a microphone in my face or in the face of any of my guests. But, boss, the press? Tell them," I said. "If they want to send a camera crew after 9 p.m., they can film the service. They can film us packing the leftover meals for the shelters. They can film the coat drive, but they are not turning this into a spectacle." Maeve nodded, understanding. "Just the work, not the drama." "Exactly." As she turned to walk away, a loud, sharp pop echoed from the kitchen station. A flash of blue light flared from the main bank of electric roasters, and the digital display went black. The oven was dead. The terrace went silent again. DeLuca, who was holding 2 massive trays of potatoes, did not even flinch. He looked at the dead oven, then at his team. "We're down," he roared. "Bay 2, get the reserve roaster online now, move. We've got 2 birds cold. We need heat. Lawson." I was already moving. "It's on. The circuit reset. It needs 5 minutes to preheat." DeLuca grinned, shifting the heavy trays. "Plan B is your specialty, isn't it, Lawson?" He looked out at the 150 guests, who were all watching. "Good," he shouted, turning back to the kitchen. "Because we just started Plan B." I did not start it. The story leaked without my permission. It began, as these things do, not with a bang, but with a click. One of the guests, a medical student I did not know, took a picture. It was not a picture of the food, or the city lights, or a selfie. It was a picture of the table, the long, single, unbroken line of it, glowing under the fairy lights, stretching almost the entire length of the terrace. It was a picture of the impossible geometry. He posted it to a private Chicago community forum. He added a simple caption: "The long table, no extra chairs." That, by itself, would have faded. It was what happened next that broke the dam. Ms. Petrova, the building's night manager, saw the post. She was a notoriously strict woman, the kind who would fine residents for leaving a doormat in the hallway, citing it as a fire hazard. She answered to the HOA. She was, I assumed, an enemy. At 8 p.m., the elevator chimed, and she stepped out. She was in her crisp uniform. She was not Mrs. Davies. She was not emotional. She was an operator. She just stood by the door for a full 5 minutes, her eyes scanning everything. She watched Jackson help Walter to his feet. She watched Amelia's 6-year-old daughter run a paper leaf over to the gratitude board. She watched Mr. DeLuca, in a fit of generosity, hand a massive slice of pie to one of the building's own doormen, who had come up on his break. Ms. Petrova watched. She did not say a word to me. She just turned, went back to the elevator, and disappeared. 10 minutes later, Maeve grabbed my arm. Her face was pale. "Boss, you need to see this." She showed me her phone. It was the community forum. Ms. Petrova had replied to the student's photo. Her comment was public. "I am the night shift building manager." Her comment began, "I have worked in this tower for 11 years. I have seen million-dollar political fundraisers and holiday parties on this terrace that were full of cold food and colder people. I just came upstairs to see this security risk for myself. I saw a retired veteran being treated with dignity. I saw a nurse, just off a 12-hour shift, laugh so hard she cried. I saw the staff I work with every day being served pie, real pie, by a world-class chef. Mrs. Davies and the board do not speak for the staff of this building. This is what neighbors are supposed to be." That comment was a match on gasoline. Someone took a screenshot of the original photo and Ms. Petrova's reply. They posted it to a public citywide blog. From there, it went to Twitter, it went to Instagram. It went viral. It was not about me. It was not about a feud. It was about the idea. The hashtag was not Penthouse feud. It was not Hoa war. It was seat for everyone. At 8:30 p.m., the local news ran the story. Just as I had insisted. There was no interview. They did not even use my name. The anchor's voice was warm, respectful. An anonymous resident in a downtown high-rise, after being told her family's Thanksgiving table was full, has decided to host a dinner for 150 strangers on her rooftop. The guest list: night shift nurses, long-haul truck drivers, and anyone else who found themselves without a place to go. The story is currently exploding online. My phone, which I had put on silent, began to vibrate so intensely on the steel console that it sounded like a muted alarm. A text from Noah. What did you do? My feed is completely blowing up. It's everywhere. That photo from your roof. That manager's comment. Someone tagged Mom. They are tagging all of us. She is losing her mind. I stared at the text. What did you do? Not, wow. Not, this is amazing. Just the old, familiar accusation. You are the problem. A new text message appeared, directly below Noah's. My mother, Beth. The text was short. What do you want from us? Aurora. What did I want from them? The question was so simple, so transactional, so utterly them. She did not ask why. She did not say, I'm sorry. She saw a public relations crisis, and she saw a negotiation. This was a shakedown. In her eyes, I had embarrassed them, and now I must want something in return. My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed out the truth. A seat. I looked at the two words. I thought about the cold metal folding chair. I thought about the pie that tasted like ash. I thought about the family-only photo on Noah's phone, with its own pathetic empty chair. I deleted the text. It was too late. I did not want a seat at their table anymore. It was too small. It was too cold. I was busy building my own. I typed back 2 words, the same 2 words I had sent my father. Enjoy your meal. I put the phone on the console. Face down, at 8:45 p.m., the weather turned. The wind, which had been a breeze, hit the terrace with a sudden, violent shove. The heavy canvas windbreaks, the ones the fire marshal had checked, snapped taut like the sail of a ship. The strings of fairy lights flickered. A blast of icy snow. Not gentle flakes, but hard, driving pellets, swept across the glass. The doors to the residential elevator chimed. It was not Mrs. Davies. It was one of the building's own security guards. A young man named Carlos. He looked profoundly embarrassed. His face was bright red. Ms. Lawson, he said, his voice quiet. He was trying not to interrupt the party. I am so sorry, but the board just called the front desk. They had a noise complaint. I looked at my watch. It's 8:46. Carlos? I know, ma'am, he said, wincing. They said it was anticipatory for the 9 p.m. curfew. They are demanding that all music be shut down, immediately. They were complaining 10 minutes early. The crowd around us had not heard, but they sensed the tension, the music, the gentle acoustic guitar, suddenly felt loud. Thank you. Carlos, I said, my voice calm. I understand. You're just doing your job. He nodded, grateful, and retreated to the elevator. I walked to the sound system. I did not turn it off. I lowered the volume, and then I adjusted the equalizer. I cut the treble almost completely. I raised the bass and the midtones, just slightly. The music did not stop. It changed. It went from being a sound to a feeling, a low, warm hum that vibrated through the floor. It was the sound of a heartbeat, not a song. It was warmer, more intimate than before. At 9 p.m., the elevator chimed again. It was the news crew, a reporter, a woman I recognized from the 10 p.m. broadcast, and a cameraman, She was all business, microphone in hand. "Ms. Lawson," she said, spotting me. "We're from Channel 5. We would love to get your side of the story. The HOA. Your family. Can you give us a comment on what this is really all about?" I shook my head. "No." She looked stunned. "No. No," I said firmly. "I am not the story. This table is not about me. It's not about a feud." "Then what is it about?" she asked, frustrated. "It's about them." I gestured to the crowd. "You want a story? Talk to them, ask them, but leave me out of it." I turned and walked away. Leaving her standing there, she was a professional, frustrated. But she saw the scene. She motioned to her cameraman. "Okay, get B-roll, get the lights, get the food." The cameraman lifted his camera. The bright, invasive television light switched on, and at that exact moment, Walter, the veteran from the first elevator, stood up. He was holding his glass of mulled cider. He tapped his spoon against the glass. "Excuse me," he said, his voice shaking but clear. "Excuse me, everyone." The terrace went quiet. The cameraman, sensing a moment, swung the camera and the light directly onto Walter. Walter looked startled, but he held his ground. "My name is Walter," he said. "I live on the 8th floor. My wife, Eleanor, she passed away 6 years ago. She loved Thanksgiving. She was the one who always set the extra plate. She used to say, 'There is always room at the table, Walter, always.'" He looked down at his glass. His hand was shaking. "This is the first Thanksgiving I have not been alone since she died. I sat in my apartment. I looked at the television. I thought, this is it. This is the rest of them. Just me." He looked up, and he looked right at me. "And then I got that invitation, and I came up here, and I was terrified. And this young woman," he pointed at me, and the camera light swung to me. I shielded my eyes. She just said, "Welcome home. And tonight, I have been seen. I was not invisible. My wife, she would have loved this. She would have loved all of you." He raised his glass, his voice cracking. "So, this is to Eleanor, to the ones who feel unseen, and this is to the long table, the table that found us all." The entire terrace erupted. It was not polite applause. It was a roar. It was stomping and cheering and whistling, nurses, drivers, students, all on their feet, raising their glasses to Walter. The cameraman did not move from Walter. He was just panning across the cheering, tear-streaked faces. The reporter was silent, her microphone forgotten at her side. She was just watching. She had her story. That clip, Walter's toast, was the lead story on the 10 p.m. news. It was ripped and posted online before the broadcast was even over. The comments were overwhelming. "I am crying. Who is Walter? I've met him in the elevator. He never smiles. He's smiling. Forget the HOA. Forget the Penthouse. This is the story. If your house is full, Chicago has a place." The Seat for Everyone hashtag was no longer a local story. It was national. My phone buzzed. Face down on the console. I did not have to look. I knew it was not my mother. It was Maeve, at my elbow, holding her own phone. "Boss, you need to see this." Her voice was ice. She showed me the screen. It was Instagram. It was Sloan. My sister had just posted. It was a perfectly lit selfie from my parents' dining room. She was holding a crystal wine glass, her smile a perfect, condescending smirk. The polished mahogany and the empty chair were just visible in the background. She had added a text overlay. "It's sad when some people have to make everything a performance, just desperate for attention, weaponizing, kindness drama queen." I stared at the words, weaponizing kindness. "Boss," Maeve said, her voice a low hiss. "That's it. We leak the text. We leak your father's table's full message. We leak the family-only photo. We can bury her in 5 minutes." I looked at Sloane's perfect, hateful face on the screen. Then I looked across the terrace. Walter was in a deep, laughing conversation with Mr. DeLuca. Amelia's 6-year-old daughter was asleep on her mother's lap, wrapped in one of the wool blankets. I locked my phone. "No," I said. "But, Aurora." "No, let the table talk. Maeve, it is saying everything we need to say." I turned away from her. The party was winding down. The violinist was packing his instrument. It was 9:30. My own phone, the one on the console, rang. It was not a vibration. It was a full, clear, ringing tone. I had forgotten to silence the ringer for actual calls. I picked it up. I did not recognize the number, but it was not blocked. It was a local area code. I answered it. "This is Lawson." There was a pause. A sound of a television in the background, then a sharp, clear voice that I had not heard in almost a year, a voice like cut glass. "Aurora. This is your grandmother, Martha. I am watching the 10 o'clock news. Turn your television off and tell me exactly what those imbeciles on your HOA board did, and then you tell me what your mother said. I am calling a car." My grandmother Martha did not wait for an answer. "I am watching Walter on the television right now," she said, her voice like a razor. "He looks better than he has in years. Now, stop talking. I just called the house. Beth and Richard are not there. Sloane is not answering her phone, I assume, after that pathetic little Instagram post. They are on their way to you to manage the situation. Am I correct?" I was speechless. "Grandma, yes, I think so." "Of course you are. They are predictable. Now, I am calling my car service. I will be there in 20 minutes. Do not let anyone leave." "Grandma, it's late." "It's snowing." "Aurora." She cut me off, her voice devoid of all patience. "I am 82 years old, not made of sugar. I taught constitutional law for 40 years. I am not afraid of a little snow or a hysterical homeowners association, and I am certainly not afraid of your mother." She paused. "And I am not taking an Uber. I want the Lincoln. I like the long ones. They make a statement. See you in 20. She hung up. I stood there, my phone in my hand, buzzing with the dial tone. The party was in its final, warm, fading phase. The news crew, electrified by Walter's toast and my subsequent refusal to comment, was packing up their equipment by the elevator. Their B-roll having turned into the lead story, Mr. DeLuca and his students were breaking down the kitchen, packing massive quantities of leftover food into foil trays for the shelter run. Maeve and the host plus guest team were managing the coat drive, which had become a mountain of donated parkas and wool coats by the door. The violin music had stopped. The terrace was quiet, filled with the low, satisfied murmur of conversation. It was 9:30 p.m. The sound check had happened without incident. The city official had measured the decibels, which were well below the permitted level, and left. We had won. The event was a success. At 9:42 p.m., my front desk console buzzed. It was Carlos, the doorman. His voice was high-pitched, laced with panic. Ms. Lawson, there is a situation. A very large black limousine has just pulled up. It is blocking the entire front drive. It is parked in front of Mr. Henderson's Bentley. I smiled. It's all right. Carlos, she's my guest. Please send her up. Her, Carlos squeaked. And Carlos, I added. My other family members may be arriving shortly. Please send them up as well. All of them. Yes, ma'am. The elevator chimed. Mrs. Davies, the HOA president, stepped out. She must have been monitoring the security feed. Her face was a mask of thunder. She had come to personally intercept the guest who dared to arrive in a limo. This is the final straw. Lawson, she began. This is a residential building, not a hotel. You cannot have commercial vehicles blocking the elevator doors behind her chimed again. The residential elevator. Mrs. Davies spun around. The doors slid open. My grandmother, Martha Lawson, stood there. She was 82 years old and 5'3", but she commanded the space of a giant. She was wearing a floor-length deep red wool cloak with a high collar. Her silver-white hair was in a perfect severe bun. She wore black leather gloves and held a simple, black, unadorned cane. She looked magnificent. She looked like a queen. She stepped out of the elevator, her cane making a sharp thud on my marble floor. She looked at Mrs. Davies. She looked at the terrace, the tables, the lights. She looked at Walter, who was sipping a final cup of coffee. "So," Martha said, her voice projecting effortlessly into the cold air, "this is the table." Mrs. Davies, momentarily stunned by the sheer force of Martha's presence, regained her footing. "I am sorry, madam. This is a private event, and it is past capacity and winding down. The resident is in violation of—" "Are you Mrs. Davies?" Martha interrupted, her voice cutting. Yes, I am the president of the board." "I thought so," Martha said. "You have his eyes, the panicked ones." She reached into her handbag, a simple, structural leather piece. She did not pull out an invitation. She pulled out a laminated card. "This," she said, holding it up, "is my building identification as a partial owner in the real estate investment trust that holds the note on this tower." Mrs. Davies's mouth opened. Martha was not finished. She pulled out a second card. "And this is my priority access card, which, as you know, grants me and my guests unrestricted access to all common areas. For observation, of course." That is not possible," Mrs. Davies stammered. "Ownership is—" "Oh, it's very possible," Martha said, her voice cheerful. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a lawyer's insignia. She handed it to Mrs. Davies. "This is a letter from my attorneys, delivered by courier this afternoon to your legal counsel. Mr. Thorne, I'm sure he'll brief you in the morning, the Martha and Arthur Parker Foundation, of which I am the sole trustee, finalized its acquisition of a 6.2% stake in the building's commercial REIT at 4 p.m. yesterday." Martha smiled. A thin, sharp, legal smile. "I have every right to be here, Mrs. Davies. I have a right to attend resident meetings. I have a right to review the minutes. And I have a right to observe community events. Especially," she added, her eyes sweeping the room, "ones that are so newsworthy." Mrs. Davies's face, which had been red with anger, was now the color of ash. The elevator chimed a third time. I did not have to look. I felt the air change. The temperature on the terrace, which had been held at bay by the heaters, seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father, Richard, my mother, Beth, and my sister, Sloane. They stood in the elevator bay, a mirror image of the inspection team that morning. They were not here to celebrate. They were not here to apologize. They were here for damage control. Sloane's face was a mask of cold fury. Her eyes locked on me, her phone gripped in her hand. My father just looked tired and angry. My mother looked like she was about to be sick. Her eyes darted from me, to the cameras, to the guests, and then they landed on her own mother. "Mother," Beth whispered. Her voice was thin, incredulous. What are you doing here?" Martha turned, very slowly. She looked at her daughter. She looked at her son-in-law. She looked at her star granddaughter. "I am here, Beth," Martha said, her voice suddenly, terribly quiet, "because I was also not invited to your dinner. It seems your table was full for me, as well." She looked straight at my mother. "When, exactly, did you start excluding me from the list?" Beth flinched as if struck. It wasn't. Sloane had her partners. It was business. It was complicated. We were going to have you over on Sunday." "Ah, yes," Martha said. "The Sunday table, the folding table, the maybe next year table. I am familiar with the concept." Sloane stepped forward. "Grandma, this is insane. You're siding with her. She is making a mockery of this entire family. She leaked this to the press. She did no such thing," Martha snapped, cutting Sloane off without even looking at her. "I have been watching." She has done the one thing this family seems to have forgotten how to do. She built a better table. My grandmother turned to me. She ignored the others, as if they were no longer in the room. She walked over. The thud of her cane on the terrace floor. She put her gloved hand on my arm. You have done well, Aurora. You used their own rules against them. Then she reached back into her bag and pulled out one more document. It was not for the HOA. It was for me. It was an addendum, a single, notarized page. I called my lawyer after I saw Walter's toast, she said. Her voice for me, but loud enough for everyone to hear. The news camera, which had been packing up, slowly turned. The little red light came back on. Martha did not care. She held the paper up. This, she said, is a copy of an addendum to my last will and testament. It was filed and witnessed this evening at 8 p.m. My estate, as you all know, is significant. Sloane took an involuntary step forward. Beth's face was white. I have adjusted the terms of the trust, Martha continued, her voice clear and formal, as if lecturing a courtroom. All previous distributions are nullified. The new criteria for inheritance are simple. I have added a new clause, she read from the page, her voice ringing with absolute, final authority. All disbursements from the Parker Foundation Trust shall henceforth be allocated based on a new, single provision metric. Whoever opens their table gets a seat. Whoever uses their seat as a weapon loses their chair. A collective gasp went up from the terrace. Walter, DeLuca, Maeve, they were all watching. Mother, Beth cried, horrified. You cannot do this. This is private. You are making a scene in front of strangers. Martha turned to her daughter. Her eyes were not angry. They were just done. Beth, this table, she gusted to the long line of lights, is not a scene. This is a community. This, she pointed at Beth, Richard, and Sloane. This frantic backpedaling, damage control arrival. This is a scene. She shook her head. The scene was the text message. The scene was the maybe next year you have been promising this child her entire life. I am finished with your scenes. My father finally spoke. His voice was a low growl. She did this to embarrass us. This whole thing, it's an embarrassment. No, Richard, Martha said, turning her piercing gaze on him. She is not embarrassing you. She looked back at me, and her eyes softened, just for a moment. She is humanizing you, and you are too blind to see it. You are angry because her light is showing you where your own is broken. She turned back to me, her hand gripping my arm. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw not just a lawyer, not just a grandmother, but the first person in my family who had ever truly, fully seen me. It is time this dinner belonged to you. Aurora, she said, her voice soft, but final. You have earned this table. Sloane lunged forward, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. You cannot do that. This is coercion. It is undue influence. She has manipulated you. Grandma, this circus, she spat the word. It has all been a performance. She leaked this to the press. She is humiliating us to try and steal your money. Mrs. Davies, who had been frozen, suddenly saw her opening. She rallied, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with Sloane. She is right. This is not a charitable event. Mr. Thorne, it is a personal vendetta. It is a calculated act of harassment against her family and against the board. We have been harassed. This is grounds. This must be grounds. Mr. Thorne looked profoundly tired. Harassment. The voice was not mine. It was Maeve's. She stepped forward from the shadows, her tablet held in one hand, glowing in the darkness. She was not emotional. She was an operator. She held the tablet up, not for my family, but for Mr. Thorne and the still-rolling news camera. Excuse me, Mr. Thorne, Maeve said, her voice clear and cold. Since Mrs. Davies has raised the issue of personal vendetta versus charitable intent, I believe this evidence is relevant to the board's position. Sloane spun on her. What is that? You have no right. That is private. Maeve, I said, my voice cut through the air. Show him. Maeve angled the tablet. The camera zoomed. The microphone picked up my voice as I identified the document. This, I said, is a series of screenshots from the Lawson family private group chat, dated 3 weeks ago, provided to me by my brother, Noah. Sloane's face went white. She looked at Noah, who stood apart from them, his face grim. He would not meet her eyes. On the screen, the text was sharp. Sloane, we must keep Thanksgiving small. This is a networking dinner. Partners and spouses only. It has to be clean. It has to be professional. My father. Richard. Agreed. Keep it simple. Good for the firm. Sloane. That means no Aurora. She will just be awkward. And it definitely means no grandma. She will pick a fight with the partners about politics. I cannot have that. My mother. Beth. I will handle it. Do not worry. Maeve swiped the screen. The next image appeared. This, I continued, my voice flat, is an email. From my mother to my father. The subject line is, finalizing the list. The camera held steady. The text was undeniable. Richard, I will text Aurora and just tell her we are full. It is simpler that way. It avoids a fight. And I agree. Let us not invite Mother. She will just make a scene. We can see her on Sunday. I did not have to say a word. I did not read the text aloud. The entire terrace, what was left of the guests, Mr. DeLuca, Walter, the news crew had seen it. The evidence hung in the air, captured by the camera's lens. The silence was a vacuum. I turned from the tablet and looked at Mrs. Davies. Her mouth was open, moving, but no sound was coming out. This was never a party, Mrs. Davies, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. This was a response. My father texted me. Thanksgiving's full. As you can see, that was not a casual remark. It was a coordinated, documented, intentional exclusion. I looked at my mother. Not just of me, but of your own mother, an 82-year-old woman, disinvited from her family's holiday because her daughter was afraid she would make a scene. My voice went hard. This event, I swept my arm across the tables, was built for the people who, like us, were told there was no room. This is the charitable act, the only personal vendetta here. Mr. Thorne. I looked at the lawyer. Is the one my family and this board have been waging against anyone who does not fit your clean, simple, full list. Mr. Thorne, the lawyer, finally moved. He took a deep breath, like a man surfacing from underwater. He adjusted his cuffs. He was, above all, a pragmatist. Mrs. Davies, he said, his voice low and final. As I advised you in my 11 p.m. memo last night, our legal position was, and is, untenable. He looked at the tablet Maeve was still holding. This new evidence, he said with profound distaste, shifts this matter from a simple bylaw dispute to a potential claim of discriminatory action. The board cannot be seen to be enforcing rules in a biased manner. We cannot be perceived as taking sides in this exclusionary family dispute, and we certainly, he looked at me, cannot legally obstruct a fully compliant, fully insured, and now documented charitable event. He turned to his client. We are done here. We must retreat. Now, Mrs. Davies was shaking. But the health, the safety, the food. It is still not. Ah, I was waiting for that one. My grandmother, Martha, stepped forward again, her eyes bright with the thrill of the fight. She, too, had one more document. She pulled a folded paper from her cloak pocket. I took the liberty of having my attorneys contact the county health department's emergency certification line 1 hour ago, Martha announced, unfolding the paper. They have reviewed the 7 inspection report. They have reviewed Mr. DeLuca's credentials. They have reviewed the live news broadcast. She held the paper up for the camera. This is their final certification. Faxed directly to my lawyer's office. It confirms this event meets and exceeds all public safety standards for temporary outdoor food service. And, she added, a wicked smile playing on her lips. They included a rather fascinating legal addendum. It seems the county takes a very dim view of third-party organizations, such as a private homeowners association, attempting to unlawfully obstruct or interfere with a certified charitable food service. They have even attached the schedule of fines for obstruction. It is breathtaking. That was the last pin, the final piece of the puzzle. Mrs. Davies looked as if I had thrown the cold Chicago wind in her face. She was, for the first time, speechless. She looked at Thorne. She looked at me. She looked at my grandmother. Without a word, she turned and marched into the elevator. Mr. Thorne, ever the professional, allowed himself a single, weary sigh. He nodded curtly to me. Ms. Lawson. He nodded to my grandmother. Madam. He stepped into the elevator. The polished steel doors slid shut. The battle was over. The terrace was impossibly quiet. The war was over. But my family was still there, defeated, exposed, stranded on my territory. Sloane was staring at Noah, her face a mask of betrayal. My father was staring at the floor, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. My mother was just crying, silent, ugly tears. The spell was broken by Mr. DeLuca. He had been watching from the kitchen, a grimly satisfied spectator. Now, he stepped forward. He wheeled a large steel utility cart into the center of the terrace, right between my family and my guests. On the cart sat 10 pies, apple, pumpkin, pecan. They were steaming. The scent of cinnamon and burnt sugar, a defiant act of peace in the cold. Tense air. Sloane finally found her voice. It was not a roar, it was a hiss. You planned this, all of it. The camera, the screenshots, the will. This was an execution. This was a trap. Before I could answer, Noah stepped forward. He had been silent. The diplomat, standing in the shadows. He was not in the shadows anymore. He put his hand on Sloane's arm. His voice was quiet, but it was not neutral. It was heavy. Sister, he said, stop. Just stop talking and listen. For once, just listen. Sloane recoiled, looking at him as if he had slapped her own ally, her neutral ground. He had just picked a side. She went silent. I walked past them. I did not want to look at them anymore. I walked to the head of the table, to my chair, the carved oak chair. I put my hand on the back of it, my fingers tracing the letters. I do not need a seat at your table anymore, I said. My voice was flat. The anger was gone. I was just empty, optimized. I do not need your approval. I do not need your permission. I am not asking you for anything. I turned, my back to the chair, and faced them. I just need you to stop taking seats away from other people. My grandmother came to stand beside me. She placed her gloved hand on the chair, right next to mine. She looked at the guests. She looked at the camera, and she read the words carved into the wood. For the one who felt unseen. From the small crowd of remaining guests, a voice, Walter. He was standing, holding his empty coffee cup. He looked at my grandmother, and then at me. Tonight, he said, his voice quiet, but carrying in the stillness. Tonight, I was seen. The camera light, which had been fixed on my family, swung to him. My mother made a small, choking sound, a sob. Aurora, she whispered. She looked lost, a child. I did not mean, I did not know. It was just, I was just afraid it would be messy. Messy, the final, pathetic, perfect excuse, the fear of inconvenience, the fear of emotion, the fear of anything that was not clean, simple, and locked down. My grandmother looked at her daughter. Her face was not angry, it was just filled with a deep, profound, and terrible sadness. "Messy, Beth," Martha said, her voice soft. "Messy is better than empty." My mother had no answer, she just crumpled. I looked at my family. The star lawyer, silenced. The powerful executive, staring at his shoes, the perfect hostess, weeping. I took a deep breath. The air was cold, but my lungs felt clear for the first time in my life. I turned away from them. I turned to my real family, to Walter, and Amelia's sleeping daughter, and Big Mike, and Maeve, and Mr. DeLuca. "Dinner continues," I said, as if I had fired a starting pistol. Mr. DeLuca plunged a silver pie server into the center of the pumpkin pie. The sound was a definitive, satisfying thunk. The young violinist, who had been watching, silent, lifted his instrument to his chin. He did not play a song, he just drew his bow across the strings, pulling one single, long, crystal-clear note that hung in the frozen air. It was the sound of a lock, finally, decisively, turning. It was the sound of a pin, at long last, being pulled. The single, long note from the violin was still hanging in the air. The sound of the pie server cutting into the crust was the only punctuation. My family stood, isolated, a frozen island of dysfunction. The rest of us, the drivers, the nurses, Walter, DeLuca, Maeve, my grandmother. We gathered around the long table. Snow had begun to fall heavily, not the hard pellets from before, but thick, slow, cinematic flakes. They drifted down, collecting on the glass roof above us, blurring the sharp, cold stars. The city lights of Chicago, 48 stories below, were reduced to a soft, hazy glow. The terrace felt like a snow globe, a world suspended, insulated from the city, insulated from the past. Martha stepped forward into the space between the tables. She looked at the young violinist, who was still holding his bow, watching her with awe. "Young man," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "may I borrow your microphone, the small one you had clipped to your stand?" He unclipped the small condenser mic and handed it to her. Martha took it, her gloved fingers closing around it. She picked up a glass of the mulled cider. She did not tap the glass. She did not need to. The entire terrace was silent, waiting. The only sound was the low hum of the patio heaters and the soft, collective hiss of the snow on the roof. She looked first at my family. Her gaze was not angry. It was assessing, clinical. She looked at Richard, her son-in-law, who still could not meet her eye. He was just a man in an expensive coat, staring at the floor. She looked at Sloane, who was vibrating with a silent, impotent fury, and she looked at her daughter, Beth, who was just broken, crying silently, her makeup ruined, her perfect holiday in ashes. Then Martha turned her gaze to the rest of us, to Walter, to Big Mike, to the elderly couple from the 10th floor, to the camera, which was still silently, respectfully, recording. "Tonight," Martha's voice was amplified, just slightly, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. "Tonight, a lesson in architecture was given. We learned that some tables are built to be fortresses. They are built to exclude. They are polished, and they are cold, and they are, in the end, empty." Her eyes found mine. "And then, we learned that some tables are built to be bridges. They are built to include, they are long, and they are warm, and they are full." She turned back toward the elevator bank, as if addressing the entire building, the entire city. "As the newest stakeholder in this building's managing trust," she announced, the legal precision returning to her voice, "I am informing the residents, and any remaining board members, of a new initiative." She paused, letting the weight settle. "The Martha and Arthur Parker Foundation is hereby pledging a full 10-year grant to fund the Penthouse Long Table as an annual Thanksgiving event for the city of Chicago. It will be professionally catered, fully staffed, and open to all. A gasp, then a wave of stunned applause, started by DeLuca and Walter. Rolling through the guests, Martha held up her gloved hand for silence. She was not finished. "Furthermore," she said, her eyes finding Sloane in the crowd, who looked like she had been struck. "As I informed my family earlier, my will and the Foundation's charter have been irrevocably updated as of this evening." She did not need to read from the paper this time. She knew the words by heart. "The terms are simple. Whoever uses their chair as a weapon loses their chair. Whoever uses their chair to invite another," she smiled, a small, fierce movement of her lips, "gets the whole table." Sloane's hand tightened on the strap of her designer bag. The leather groaning, she was silent, defeated by a clause she could not argue. I looked at Noah. He stood apart from them, near the greenhouse. He looked at me, and he gave one slow, infinitesimal nod. The diplomat had left his post. A side had been chosen. I did not look at the camera. I did not look at my parents. I looked at the one empty chair, the one I had carved. I placed my hand on the back of it, my fingers tracing the deep grooves of the words. It felt solid. It felt like a scar that had finally healed, no longer tender, just a part of the structure. I picked up my own glass. I turned to my guests, my family. "To those who used to stand at the door," I said, my voice clear, ringing in the cold, "from now on, this door is open." "Cheers!" Walter shouted, his voice cracking with emotion, and he raised his cup. A chorus of cheers echoed from the drivers, the nurses, the students, the fairy lights reflected in the wet eyes of the elderly couple from the 10th floor. They started clapping. It was not the thunderous applause from before. It was a deep, rhythmic, heartfelt validation. And that couple, they were members of the association. They were the HOA, and they were clapping. It was late, but it was real. My father, Richard, finally looked up. He took a step forward, his mouth opening, a desperate, final attempt to reclaim the narrative. "Aurora," he said, his voice hoarse. I just... No one waited. No one cared what he had to say. The young violinist, taking his cue, raised his bow and began to play. Not Bach, not a folk song. It was a soaring, defiant, beautiful piece, full of joy and release. The music swelled, filling the terrace, swallowing my father's words, washing them away. Mr. DeLuca, laughing, picked up a spoon and began tapping it against a water glass, creating a driving, joyful rhythm, clink, 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 a celebration. The moment was broken. The old world was over. My grandmother leaned in close to me, her voice for me alone, a whisper under the music. "You see, child," she said, her eyes bright, reflecting the lights. "You stopped waiting for permission. You gave permission." I looked up. The snow was a blizzard now, a white wall insulating us from the world. The glass roof was thick and frosted. The city below was just a memory of light. I took the carved chair, the one that said, "For the one who felt unseen." I lifted it. It was heavy, solid oak. I walked it to the exact center of the long, long table. I placed it there, angled out. No one sat in it. It was not for sitting. It was for seeing. It was a centerpiece. It was a promise. The news cameraman, who had captured all of it, zoomed in. His lens caught the final, perfect moment. My grandmother, Martha, raised her glass of cider. I raised mine. Our glasses met. A small, clear clink of old glass and new, and the applause, the real applause, from Walter, from DeLuca, from Maeve, from the drivers, from the nurses, from the neighbors. It rose up into the snowy night. It was the only answer that ever mattered. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please, drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Do not forget to like this video and, If you really want to support us, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.